So, like any good rabbi, when given the choice between the hard technical subject and the easier subject, I took the easy subject. Because this Shabbat, we are going to take out two Sifrei Torah. We are taking out both the regular Sidra, the regular order, which is Parshat Pekudei, which is very technical. It's about the completion, most of the garments of the Kohanim, and the final installment of the Kohanim. And then we also have one of the four special parshiot leading up to Pesach. And this one is the one which has really the most direct um, connection to Pesach, because this one is Parshat Hachodesh, and Parshat Hachodesh actually is gives the mitzvah of the Passover lamb. We will look at this in a little bit of its own depth, but to me, it's important to just stress a couple of things, which you've probably heard me stress before, but it's always worth sort of looking at these as a piece. So the first is the parsha begins, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. And God said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, Hachodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim, rishon hu l'chodshei shana. This month shall be to you the first of months, the first of all the months of the year. Now, um, this statement, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor, and God said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt. There's only one mitzvah which we are told is given to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, and that is this first mitzvah of the calendar. This mitzvah is understood by rabbinic tradition to be the first mitzvah given to the children of Israel. Now, it's not really the first mitzvah in the Torah, because we will get references to Shabbat that are in the first narrative of Breshit. Excuse me. We will get the mitzvah of the Gid HaNasheh, of the sciatic nerve, Yaakov's shoulder or hip injury, gives birth to it, but that's not a mitzvah that's given to the children of Israel. This is a mitzvah where it uses this word lamor. Oh, forgot I was in this word lamor right here. I'll circle that. This word lamor means saying, tell this over to them, instruct this to the children of Israel. And so this is the first mitzvah that is given to all of the children of Israel. And Rashi will even make the suggestion that this should be the first chapter of the Torah. That in the very first Rashi in the Torah, back in Breshit, Rashi says, oh, you know what? Really, the Torah should have started here. The Torah is a law book. What is the first mitzvah that's given to the Jewish people? It's this mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. And so there's something special and unique about it, in that it is the first mitzvah. And the second is that it is the first one given to all of the children of Israel, and that it also is the only one where it says it's given in the land of Egypt. Now, as a scientist, I will tell you that timing is a very important thing in your experimental design. Certainly anything to do with physics, you have to always be able to set your time frame, delineate your time factor. It really is an indispensable element of everything that you do when you measure physical properties. And so the idea that we are sort of starting off this enterprise of the children of Israel with a timestamp is, from a scientist perspective, is perfectly logical. That you really are not going to initiate anything without a timestamp. On a cultural level, as we've discussed before, it's also extremely important that the Jewish people are living in the time frame of their host culture, which is the Egyptians. And in every culture, both the culture we live in and the culture of the Egyptians, the months took on names that were names of divinities. And what is fascinating about pure Hebrew months, not the ones we adapted from the Persians, not the ones we use today, because those are the ones we adapt from the Persians. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. Those are all Persian adaptations or Babylonian adaptations. But the ones that we use here, which are counted in the Torah, days and months are always just counted by numbers. And that is to keep the gods away from the months. And so the pristine Hebrew calendar is presented. It marks time from the Exodus from Egypt. We are told this is the first of months, and we have extricated ourselves to a certain extent from the culture of Egypt by saying we have our own time system. We work on our own clock or our own calendar. And I think that's a very important piece of the picture. Rabbi Soloveitchik goes very far. He has an essay called Sacred and Profane. And in his essay, Sacred and Profane, he says that the mitzvah of Sfirat Omer, the mitzvah of counting the Omer, is because the slave has got to appreciate the time as a dynamic force, not just as a static force, but as a dynamic force, as an opportunity to be creative, to put your imprint on history, to live as a person of destiny. And that has to be learned. And so the mitzvah of Sfirat Omer, if you recall, you're going to count both weeks and days. You are going to have to understand not only the value of every moment, but also how to incorporate this, as Rabbi Soloveitchik says, into the warp and woof of history. And it was a very beautiful and poetic statement. And so here, I'm just going to show you a very interesting dimension by which this particular mitzvah is taken to be a very creative and dynamic idea, that the liberation of the Jewish people is such that time is no longer the taskmaster that sits over their shoulder. How many bricks can you produce in a day, right? That would be the time that they're escaping from. The time that they are coming to is a very different time. What is that time? So it says, "V'chein ein beit din shel mala nichnasen ledin b'Rosh Hashanah ela im kein kiddush beit din shel mata et hachodesh." The heavenly court does not sit to judge us on Rosh Hashanah until the lower court decides that it is Rosh Chodesh. So this mitzvah of setting Rosh Chodesh, the way it was actually taken or practiced, is you would have two witnesses that would see a moon that looks just like this, and they would come to Jerusalem. Interestingly, they used to have a kiddush all night in Jerusalem because they wanted people to come. That's how old the idea of luring people to a religious activity with kiddush is. And they would wait for two witnesses, and they would check the two witnesses, and they would say, did you see the moon like this, like that? What was it like? And on what day was it? And they would establish, okay, we've seen the new moon, because the old moon looks like this, but the crescent is on the left side. And so we want to know that they have actually seen a moon like this. When the two witnesses come and say they've seen the moon like this, the court in Jerusalem can then establish that we have a new month. But let's just say for whatever reason there was a rainstorm and the witnesses were delayed, or it was a cloudy night and they couldn't see it. So it was only the next day that it was established. Well, even though by God's clock, this was meant to be Rosh Hashanah on a different day, now Rosh Hashanah is on the day that the earthly court determines it. So this statement is that ve'ein beit din shel ma'ala nichnosen ladin, God's heavenly court cannot come in to judge people until the lower court establishes that today is Rosh Hashanah. And just recall that there were maybe 2 days that it could be Rosh Hashanah. We weren't sure, was it going to be on Tuesday night? Was it going to be on Wednesday night that they established Rosh Hashanah? That's how it would work in the old days before they had an intercalated calendar. That means a mathematically programmed out calendar. Once upon a time, it was solely in the hands of the court. And here, the court is essentially saying, God is essentially saying, I am at the mercy and disposal of the Jewish court. Now, that is an extreme statement of dynamic time, because basically what it says is not only is your own destiny pregnant in your hands with time as the putty that you can form, But who else is going to be dependent on your decisions? Who will bend his will, capital H, to your time? Answer is God. It's a very strong statement, and it gives enormous power to the Jewish people to be able to forge their destiny, control their time. I think it's both an eloquent and a powerful statement. Now, actually, let me just let's look at this before we go there. Let me just look at the paragraph of Exodus 12, right? So we just read this. Exodus 11. All right, here. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim limor. And Hashem said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, tell the Jewish people, about this mitzvah. HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim. This month is to you the first of months. Rishon hu lachem l'chod shana, the first of months of the year. This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first months of the year to you. So this is effectively the declaration that Nisan is a Rosh Hashanah. It's the beginning of a year. We all know that, the best way I can explain the fact that we have two Rosh Hashanahs is like this. If you run a company, you might have a fiscal year that runs from April 1st to March 31st, right? There are various, the academic year. The academic year runs from September to May, right? It does not necessarily follow the calendar year. And so for Jews, you might say that there's one Rosh Hashanah for the spiritual year, that is the one that we call Rosh Hashanah, and there's another one for the political year, and that would be the first of Nisan. And if you look at the Bible, when it gives you dates, pretty much every book of the Bible until the Jews are exiled to Babylonia, it will tell you that this happened in the 10th month, this happened in the 7th month. For example, the Tisha B'Av, I think, is going to be listed as the 10th month. No, sorry, the 4th month, right? We're going to learn at the fast of the 7th month. That's going to be Tzom Gedaliah. There are different things which are all listed in the dates, and everything references the Exodus from Egypt. And part of that is that for Jews, that is the foundational event. That is the anchor. That is the axis upon which our religion builds, our national consciousness builds, and so everything goes to that. So now we know that there's a month, and then we're going to get the next instruction. Dabru el kol adat Yisrael lemor, speak unto the entire congregation of Israel, saying, Be'asor lachodesh hazeh, on the 10th of this month, v'yikchu lahem ish sela beit abot sela bait. Speak to the community leadership of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to his family, a lamb to a household. So there is something that happens on the 10th of the month, and we are meant to take a lamb. Now, why are you meant to take a lamb? I will take answers in print or in speech. No one. Why do we have to take a lamb? Ab is the 5th month, methinks. Okay. Yes, maybe you're correct. The 4th month would be the 17th of Tammuz. Good. But what about this lamb? The lamb. Kol adat b'nei Yisrael, every family or every group of families, every household, they have to take a lamb on the 10th. Why are we taking it on the 10th? We're not going to do anything with it until the 14th.
Time to the bedpost.
Okay. And why do we do that?
Get rid of their gods.
Sorry, English.
Get rid of their god.
Okay. You get rid of their god by tying it to the bedpost for 4 days?
Making sure it's pure.
Okay. Or mostly making sure its purity is not perhaps a discoverable property, but the making sure that it doesn't have any blemishes, that would be a discoverable property, right? So you bring it into your house, and you make sure we have 4 days. This is, by the way, one of the reasons we read this portion early, right before the new month of Nisan. We're going to read this to ensure that we have a to ensure that we have enough time, so to speak, to physically inspect this animal. Now, let's just get in a little bit more information. Maybe there are only 3 people in your household, right? So what are you going to do? You and your neighbor, someone who's near your household. In proportion to the number of persons, you shall contribute for the lamb according to what each household will eat, right? So let's just say you get, I don't know, 10 pounds of usable meat from a lamb, and there are, 40 people. So each person is going to pay for about 1/4 of a pound. And that means, you split the cost of the lamb into 40, and now everybody can afford it. It shall be a male that is perfect. Right? You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. So this could be a sheep or a goat. And you should guard it, keep watch over it until the 14th day of that month. And then you should slaughter it in the evening time. And you take of the blood, and you put it on the 2 doorposts and on the crossbeam, on the houses upon which you will eat it. You shall eat it. It shall be fired, it should be roasted on a fire, on matzah, and with bitter herbs. You shall not eat of it raw, nor boiled in water. But rather, you should do it with its head upon it and its stomach as well. You should not leave any of it till the morning. You have to burn it up in the fire. And you have special instructions for what you're supposed to wear to dinner. You should have your travel belts on. And your shoes should be on. And your stick should be in your hand. Your staff should be in your hand. And you shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to Hashem. And God then says, I'm going to pass through Egypt. I'm going to smite the Egyptians. And this blood will be for you a sign on your doorposts. And you shall not be attacked by the force of death, whatever that is, whatever the cause of death that HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates. Well, that will not bring harm to you so long as you engage in this ritual and you put the blood on your doorposts. Right? And right, this day shall be for you of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to Hashem throughout the ages. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time. Shivat yamim matzot tochelu. You eat leavened bread for 7 days. Okay, etc., etc. And then it goes on to detail the holiday, maybe a little bit about guarding the matzot, okay, and it's telling you a little bit more about the mitzvah of matzot. And as well, it tells us not to have any chametz in our home. So I want to throw out an idea, which I've thrown out before. Many of you may have heard it. And it is the idea that what we're talking about here is the
And we have those.
of shepherds versus farmers.
Yeah.
And so it is without question that Egypt is going to represent the world of the farmers, right? How do I know that they represent the world of farmers? Well, number one is we know that Egypt is an agricultural society, and um, we know that the Nile River, right? Joseph collected grain, and this was a major operation, right? This is a sort of the identity of Egypt is grain. Now we have previously talked about this idea that one of the themes that runs through certainly the book of Breshit, we've made the argument through the 5 books of the Torah, is that there's a tension that farmers kill shepherds, right? And the paradigm of that is Cain murdering Abel. But we also see that Moses flees the agricultural world of Egypt to become a shepherd. We saw also that Cain built the first city. We see that when the Jews are punished after the sin of the spies, it says, "You ro'im, you shall be shepherds for 40 years." Both Abraham and Yaakov were shepherds, and we see more than that, right? In Mordechai, you were referencing this just a few moments ago. When you said the Egyptian god, how do you know that it's an Egyptian god?
Ramesses.
Ramesses. So what does that mean? Ram, he sees, but not up close?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what Mordechai was referring to, although he didn't say it, is that when when Joseph comes to present his brothers to Pharaoh, he says, you should let them live in the land of Goshen because it is an abomination to the Egyptians, those who eat um, small cattle or small animals, right? It's toevala mitzrim kol ro'ei tzon, that Joseph knows, then his brothers know that there is a cultural aversion of the culture of Egypt to the world of the shepherd, and specifically to the food of the shepherd. Right? This is something that is emphasized several times in the story of Breshit and the story of Joseph and his brothers and how they come down to the land of Israel. So the argument I want to make here is that the actual, so this is, by the way, the hydraulic culture. Again, you can sort of see as this is from a modern satellite picture of all the farming that pops up around the Nile River Valley, which is supported by canals, and it takes an authoritarian leader like a Nimrod or a Pharaoh who will coerce and organize the population to produce this kind of outcome. Now here, I think there's a very, very interesting concept. It says, "Kacho tochlu oto." This is how you shall eat the Passover offering. We read this sentence just a few minutes ago. Matnechem chagorim, your belts on, nalechem beraglechem, right, and your sandals on your feet. So just those two elements, right? The idea that you're supposed to wear it with your belt on and your shoes on your feet. What does that tell us about the act of eating the Pesach? Why those two things? I know we have a third thing to get to, but why those two things? Why do I have to have my shoes on? Why do I have to have my belt on?
Just hasty. Like it was just a hasty thing. Like you got to be ready to go.
Correct. Right? We're eating quickly, right? And even it says that a little bit later, right? It's going to use the word b'chipazon, right? With haste, you're going to eat this. But now you could interpret the words umakelchem biyedchem and your staff in your hand, right? You could understand that as, yes, we need to eat fast. So what's fast? Well, everything you need to go. What do you need to go? Well, I need my belt. I need my shoes. I need my walking stick, right? If you assume that makelchem refers to a walking stick, so far, there's nothing really new that is added with that word umakelchem, right? That's a walking stick. That's like shoes. That's like belts. But Ibn Ezra says, and it depends on how you read this. He says umakelchem biyadchem linhog hachamorim. This is not the stick that I put next to us here, right? Right? That we have Bilam who hit the donkey with a stick. So Ibn Ezra says, this is, what do we, if I were to the way that Ibn Ezra would translate this into modern English, it says, okay, belt on, shoes on, car keys in your hand. Because for the Ibn Ezra, the stick is the stick of the donkey driver, which is essentially the car keys, right? But it is entirely possible that the makelchem is the staff of the shepherd, right? If we're going to drive our sheep into the desert, we are going to have these crooks, and we have to have that in our hand. And perhaps, I don't have anything better to prove this with you. At least I tried today to find somebody who would say actually the shepherd's crook, but it seems to me that we could make an argument that this is the shepherd's crook, which would be very interesting, right? Because now we have a group of people who are coming out as shepherds. Now, here, I can give us a little bit more of a detailed point of view. It says, Al tochlu mimenu na. You're not allowed to eat this animal raw. So what does that mean, you're not allowed to eat this animal raw? It says, let's say you're roasting your Passover lamb, and one of the Egyptians comes by, as it's being roasted. This comes from a French commentary, a junior of Rashi's, who says, don't take it off the fire, right? You can imagine that, there's a Jew there who's like, okay, I'm with Moses. Moses brought the plague of the firstborn. He brought the plague of darkness. He brought the plague of hail. I'm totally with Moses. I'm with him. I'm going to get my sheep. I'm going to roast my sheep on my front lawn. Everyone can see it. And all of a sudden, the first Egyptian authority, his neurological pathways are fixed on avoiding danger, avoiding a beating. And so he says, oh, you know what, Taka, honey, it's done. That's not uncooked. That's just rare. And so he makes the argument and wants to take it off. And the Chizkuni says, that's not how this works. Do not be afraid of him. That is the entire point of this. Not to be afraid of the Egyptian, right? Because don't eat it raw. Don't take it off because you're afraid for other people to see this. And they said because there was definitely a fear of this. No, so it says because that was the fear. The fear was that people would do this. They would just get it out. They would have it, the flames flicker a little bit. They take it inside prison. What lamb? We're not allowed to eat lamb. We're only eating wheat. This is a Gardein lamb, right? And so the idea of this lamb, of roasting this lamb, I think we might think of it in a very, very different terms. Because the lamb is going to represent shepherd food. And chametz is going to represent agricultural economy food. And so we're seeing this great identity shift that is playing out over what is going to be for dinner. And so we are going, and you're going to ask me matzah, and I'll give you the answer to matzah in just a moment. But in this case, the idea that you're eating a lamb and you're roasting it on your front yard and you are demonstrating we eat differently. We are not eating Egyptian food. We are not counting Egyptian time. We are going to do things in the Jewish way. We're going to do things like shepherds. That is what this ritual, in a sense, says. Okay, Mordechai, you have patiently had your hands up.
Thank you. Maybe you'll sort me out on this one. McCollum, the the actual word, I always think of it as the
Which
matzah
actual word? Which actual word?
kalchem, the walking stick
Okay.
or shepherd's crook that we have. So I always thought of it as being the same in following the power of Moshe Rabbeinu and his mate. And
Okay. Would you say that's the only way to interpret it?
I, I'm sorry?
Would you say that is the only way to interpret it?
No, but
Okay.
I just wondered if that was a legitimate thought because I always thought of that.
Well, but it doesn't say matechem. It says makelchem.
Yes.
So I don't know. I didn't say anybody say everybody's a little Moses in their house.
Yeah. It comes all the way from beginning of time.
No,
Given
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means in this context.
goes all the way back to Eight Sadas and Kabbalistic concepts.
Okay, all right, but I don't know that I'm not sure that this interpretation has to reconcile that one. Andy, what's your question or comment?
So my question is, are we to understand that the Egyptian ate raw meat from the inference that we have to not eat raw meat?
No. This is again. This is the Chizkuni's reading. The Chizkuni's reading is that why would the Jew take his lamb off the fire raw? Because he doesn't want the Egyptian to see him roasting a lamb, period. Right?
Oh, I see.
And so the Jew is pretending to himself that this is cooked because he wants to get this in early.
Because they're still slaves, right? They haven't left yet.
Well, yes, but look, let's just say the Jew is baking matzah that night. So no Egyptian's bothering him because he could be baking matzah any night. Who knows what he's got in his oven, right? But the command here is from daylight hours, to roast this animal whole. It says rosho al kira'av al kirbo, right? It's head on its body, right, on its entirety. And so you have to roast this thing whole. By the way, shows you you can tell by the image that it's an artificial intelligence image, which I did. I asked AI to generate this because AI can't figure out that when you put a sheep there, you don't roast it with the wool on. But that's okay. It's good for us to know that the intelligence is still artificial. Now, but again, this is a classic shepherds versus farmers kind of a scenario. Now let's go one step further, right? I got one problem with right? If my theory was true, then the Seder meal in the biblical context would be gluten-free, correct?
Why gluten-free? Maybe well, you mean it will have no vegetation because they were herders?
If wheat represents Egypt, then I should have no wheat at my Passover meal, right?
Yeah, that's
true. Is that
true.
the case? Is there no meat at the Passover meal?
Oh yes, lots of meat, yeah.
I'm sorry, so there's no wheat, sorry.
Well, there's matzah, and matzah is wheat. But other than that,
okay. Thank you, Andy. That's the problem. We have matzah, and matzah is made out of wheat.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I've one answer and one question. So
Okay.
The answer for your question is that the problem was not with the wheat. The problem was with the bread culture that the Egyptians.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good. Say more.
So we know that the pride of the Egyptian was on their was on their bread. By the way, we see that in the story of Joseph and his brothers. כי לא יוכלו המצרים לאכול לחם. It was very.
Oh, so you're saying the prohibition to eat together was to eat bread.
Yeah, it's not just a bread, as other commentaries explain that it's a name of the dinner. It was a bread, because that the Egyptian national
Dish.
dish. Yeah, right.
Very good.
So the problem was with the bread itself, not with the wheat. The wheat is the very, very basic ingredient for every human being. And like the matzah represent a wheat that is the kind of food that it could be generated from wheat, but in a different fashion that will provide the same calories, the same calories and energy, but not in a proudly fashion like the Egyptian used to.
Right.
Left
So
on.
I'm going to make,
on.
just because I have to be at Mincha in 7 minutes, I'm gonna sort of present my thesis. So I'm getting this a little bit, or my window into this came from an article by Uriel Simon on the story of Natan HaNavi to David HaMelech. The story of Natan HaNavi to David HaMelech is that there was once a rich man and a poor man who lived next to each other. And the rich man decided not to take a sheep of his own flock, but he decided to take a sheep from his neighbor's flock, using what Uriel Simon demonstrates that even amongst the Bedouins today, there is there's sort of a practice that if you have no food to give your guest, you're allowed to take your neighbor's sheep. You have to pay him back later, but you're allowed to take your neighbor's sheep to feed a guest. There's a very, very strong culture in the Middle East, specifically amongst shepherding people, about caring for guests. It's a very, very interesting element of their culture. And I would say that you can see it in a couple of different places. One is, again, Uriel Simon's analysis of the story of the shepherd and this sheep. And you see the example of Natan HaNavi, and it seems totally logical that his neighbor takes a sheep from his neighbor. The problem in the analogy of Natan HaNavi is not that he took a sheep. It's that he had sheep already. You're not supposed to do that if you have your own sheep. And that he took a precious sheep, a sort of a house pet sheep, from his neighbor. That was the other piece of the problem in the story of Natan HaNavi. Another thing which we also see is Avraham, as the quintessential shepherd, is very, very welcoming to guests. It's sort of the sine qua non of Avraham is that he takes guests in. He's interested. He's eager to have guests. And the one time that we see matzah before this story is in the story of Lot. And Lot makes his matzah for guests. And so the idea that a wheat-based bread is going to be served by a shepherd, but it's served in matzah. Matzah is a quick bread, right? If you've ever made lafas, you don't sit around letting them rise all day like a baguette or a sourdough, right? Or a challah. You roll it out very thin and you bake it immediately, and you can see that it has it poofs up very quickly. It makes its own pocket. And so it rises, I guess, in a slightly different way. And the matzahs that they were talking about were not the things that you buy from, the Baba Ver Hasidim. They were soft, pliable things, much more like the lafas that you're going to get in Machane Yehuda. And so I would suggest that food is also shepherd food, and it's guest food. And the assertion here is in contradistinction to the cities. What cities do, what Egypt does, is they keep out strangers. What are the two cities that we know of that keep out, or two cultures that we know for whom strangers are real problems?
The USA
In the Bible, in the Tanakh.
in the Bible.
I mean, look, you could build, you are entitled to build your own drushes about immigration policies. I'm just saying in the
Sodom.
Tanakh.
Sodom.
I think
Sodom,
Jericho
right?
is one.
Sodom is one, right? Right?
And
Right? Let us deal wisely with them, says Pharaoh. But he's afraid of these Jews who are strangers in his midst, right?
yes.
What is the outcome for the Jew for Egypt, right? Do not oppress the stranger, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. Shepherds are comfortable with strangers, right? Cities are uncomfortable with strangers. It's fascinating, right? Who's more vulnerable, the city or the shepherd? The shepherd's much more vulnerable, right? But it's so interesting, that inversion. And so but where is this, by the way, preserved today in your Seder?
The what? The being the girl.
כל
because
דכפין יבוא יתה ויאכול.
Yafeh, right? Halach ma'anya. When we start our Seder, before we even say the Manishtana, right? We say, this is the bread of affliction, and we say, Kol dichvin yeta v'yechol. Anybody who's hungry, let him eat. The first thing we say about the matzah, right, is when we say, no, if you're hungry, come join my Seder, right? So this is a very
if I can go back to my original question, firstly, did the Egyptians eat raw meat? That's one. And the secondly, because they were because they were not shepherd, and it was an abomination for them to eat with the children of the brothers of Yosef, because they were herders. So does that mean that they were sort of vegetarian, maybe?
Yes, let's say that. So first of all, the raw element seems to be about the fact that Jews might be afraid to leave it out long enough. It's not. I don't have no evidence that Egyptians ate raw meat. That's not the issue. The issue is that we see in many different ways that the Egyptian culture does not want herders, because the brothers have to live in Eretz Goshen. They can't live in Egypt proper, right? That there's an abomination to be a shepherd in Egypt, right? The sacredness of the lamb was a way of making it taboo. You can't eat the lamb because they don't want it to threaten their hydraulic culture, their agrarian culture.
Well, that was very clear, yeah.
Right? So that's and so roasting this animal on the front lawn is a way, you could say. I know I'm making this whole thing about shepherds and farmers, but it's another way to say I belong to the Avot. Right? Avram was a shepherd. Yaakov was a shepherd. The brothers were shepherds, right? And so it is a way of these Jews to say, we are reclaiming our heritage. We are going back to our earlier days, where we are reclaiming the spirit of the Avot. Anyway, I have exhausted my time because I have to get to Mincha, but hopefully I have at least sold you a little bit on this theory. Okay, we will return for those who wish at 8 p.m. with some Pesach halachot.
Okay, תודה רבה.